no, I think there are just some areas that I think developers, they don't put effort into. They'll put effort into grokking algorithms, but they're not going to put effort into, conversational skills. And I've seen that a number of times where, like, I've worked with people, they wouldn't let in client meetings. And it's like, I never want to be the developer. They don't let in client meetings. I want to be the guy
Yeah.
that they want in the client meetings because I can express the work that I'm doing and the value it gives or whatever. So I do just think, like, a lot of those books that I see myself picking are very much, like, I think, underrepresented skills from developers.
Hey everyone, welcome to Book Overflow. This is the podcast for software engineers by software engineers, where every week we read one of the best technical books in the world in an effort to improve our craft. I am Carter Morgan, and I'm joined here, as always, by my co-host, Nathan Toups. How are you doing, Nathan?
Doing great. Hey, everybody.
Well, we are very excited. We have another special episode for you today, branching off a bit from, again, we always have our discussion episodes every week, and then we've also been fortunate to be interviewing plenty of authors. We do not promise that we always have bonus episodes. We just honestly had so many that it seems like a regular thing. But anyhow, we don't always get to interview every author that we want to. So something Nathan and I were talking about, we're obviously big readers. We want to inspire our readers to be more voracious readers. So we thought, what if we contacted some interesting people in the tech community and asked them to share with us their favorite books? And so we kicked that idea around and we made it happen. We actually just wrapped up an interview, and you'll hear it here soon, with Scott Tolinski. He is the host of the podcast Syntax. It is a web development podcast, very big podcast. They have almost 400,000 subscribers on YouTube and are bigger on their other audio platforms. And so we reached out to Scott, and he is a big reader too. And he actually is a listener to the podcast. And he was kind enough to join us and chat about some of his favorite books. I loved this interview. I mean, it was great. Nathan, what did you think?
Yeah, it's cool to hear somebody who has like a holistic approach and really cares not just about the technical craft, but also the soft skills that go around having a career in this industry. It was a delight. I think you're going to have so much fun hearing it.
Scott is really someone who draws his knowledge from a wide pool, and he's not limited to just tech stuff. He actually shares a lot of books that aren't specifically technology related, but we talk about how it's affected his career. We talk a bit about the unconventional path he took to be a software engineer. We talk about having confidence in yourself. It's really just a fantastic interview, a delight. We cannot thank Scott enough for taking the time to come onto the podcast with us. It really was a huge honor. So we hope you enjoy this. Scott Tolinski is about to share with us some of his favorite books, and we hope you enjoy. Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Well, great. Well, we're excited to have you on. Regular listeners know that usually we interview authors about the books, but we're branching out, and we wanted to have kind of notable people in the industry on, especially people who are consider themselves voracious readers like we do. And we know that you have several books that you've read and recommend to others. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is just kind of your favorite books and what you like about them and why you think more people should read them. So let's start with that. You said you came prepared with a list of books. Why don't you talk about your first one, your favorite one, your hottest take? What do you want to talk about?
I have both a stack of physical books here and some on Audible.
Great.
Yeah. So you know what? It's so funny to me because programming books are tough for me. I have dyslexia, right? So even reading like a straight up book is kind of a slog for me. So in more recent times, it's been 100% audiobooks for me, which is an interesting thing when you get into programming books. Some of them, one of them that I really like is Grokking Algorithms. Great book.
It's on our backlog, and I have a physical copy of that one as well.
Yes, I have a physical copy because it has pictures. Dyslexia doesn't matter if you have pictures. But I actually also have mostly listened to this book on audiobook. So what I really like about Grokking Algorithms, besides the technical information, is that it was able to be adapted into an audiobook, but you also get the benefits of the visuals if you're I'll put it on in my ear and I'll look through it. So for me, that's a nice little middle ground between like, oh shoot, you're you're screwed. This book is all code examples, and you're going to be staring at. I guess code examples are easier for me to read in books than paragraphs of text. But yeah, so Grokking Algorithms, highly recommended, especially, like I said, people who are more visual learners will get a lot from this book. There's so many great just diagrams in here. And I don't have a traditional computer science background. So I'd never spent the time with this stuff. I came from more of like, I wanted to be a designer when I first started, like way back in 2008, and I found out I was just much better at the technical side of things. So I kept on going further in that direction. So I came from really a much more of a creative background into development. So for me, like my big missing area is so many of the things people get in their computer science. Which is interesting because a lot of my books here that I really like that I'll share with you are almost not even tech books in that way.
Well, let's talk a bit about grokking algorithms and some of the stuff you said. I love what you say about coming from a non-traditional background. That's something I'm the same way. Nathan is the same way. And it's something I kind of felt self-conscious about for a long time. And it's been funny as we've been doing this podcast that like almost everyone that we've interviewed or talked to winds up kind of in a similar bucket. Even people like John Osterhout, who wrote A Philosophy of Software Design. He was a physics student, right? So grokking algorithms you really enjoy because it covers some of those bases that you might have missed from like an undergrad degree. Do you want to give a quick summary of grokking algorithms for our audience?
Yeah, well, so it is pretty much what it says on the cover. It's an illustrated guide to algorithms, really. And like I said, that's a lot of like the foundational things where there's even like you hear X, Y, and Z, quicksort, whatever. You hear these things all the time, and I have an idea of what they are. I've watched GIFs about them, or I've seen YouTube videos, but to have them illustrated in a way that is kind of step by step, using, it's. I'll see if I can even like bring up something here, but even just these diagrams are much more of an intuned way to understand what exactly the flow is going on, and it's not just like the bubble diagrams. It's not just like that type of thing. There's drawings, like here's implementing the graph, and there's photos of dogs and stuff like that. So there's something just so nice about it, almost being a little childish and just very visual that speaks to me as a learner. Like I'd mentioned with the reading challenges I found that like a lot of my knowledge building in general has come from watching YouTube, which is kind of my library at this point for web development.
Now, I think a lot of people who come, not a lot of people, I've met some people who come from non-traditional backgrounds who kind of look at things like algorithms and say, who really needs to know it, right? I just need to know how to interact with the APIs and get something on the screen. Sounds like you don't agree that you're obviously recommending this book, Grokking Algorithms. Why do you think understanding algorithms is a good tool for software engineers?
I don't know if everybody needs to, but I do think that it fills in some of the gaps of why you're doing some things. Oftentimes, and I don't necessarily have a specific example, but I've been working on UIs for so long and in so many different front end languages that it really feels like you're doing things because this is how you do them. This is how you've been told to do them. This is how the documentation says to do them. When it's nice to have a better understanding of underpinning sometimes of what things are going on, but also like if you see a pattern in the wild, you can better identify it. You can understand the choices and why they made them. And to me, that like again, somebody who has, like you said, a little bit of that feeling like. I missed so much from a computer science degree. It's helpful to have that context sometimes, even when you don't necessarily really need it. Like I can make UIs without understanding algorithms or anything like that. I can sort data. I can do all my filtering and all that stuff. But like, I really, I think it's an interesting thing, and it's fun to dive into these concepts in a approachable way, because for the most part, a lot of this stuff can get pretty dry. I laugh. I had a book on regex that I tried to get through like 100 times.
Real page
I
turner.
swear, there's something about it. It like will like just if I want to go to sleep, it's reading that regex book. So you know, so there's something about technical documentation for me, or anything like super technical, that makes it really hard to get through. I guess unless we're getting into the audiobook territory, because after listening to your pod, I did put on, you know, the what was it, the fundamentals of software architecture, I think was one that you covered.
Which is
that,
Oh yeah,
great
it's a great one.
audiobook. Yeah.
Yeah, basically anything that I can get on audiobook, I'll put on. So yeah. But in that same regard as Grokking Algorithms, Julia Evans puts out these, I think she calls them zines, but they're really, you know, this is funny. This one's a pocket guide to debugging. And I bought this just to support her. But in the same regard, she puts out these little books, and they're like just comics, pretty
Oh, that's
much.
so cool.
Oh, that's cute.
And she has a whole ton of them on her site. So this is Julia Evans, the Pocket Guide to Debugging. And I thought these are things were approachable enough that, like, at some point I'm going to give these to my kids if they're interested in this stuff. I know at least one of my kids will probably end up being an engineer just based on, you know, the assessment of their brain so far. But it does put it in like a really approachable, cute way. And I do like it a lot.
I just barely saw the cover of that, and my son has been reading Captain Underpants lately, and it kind of looked like it a bit. And I was just like,
much, yeah.
I'm like, did Scott bring Captain Underpants to talk
Yes.
about? Like, if he wants to,
It's
we
very
will.
possible. Yeah, my son is
love
also
that-
very into Captain Underpants right now.
Oh, cool.
I love that the first two books that have this like theme of playfulness. I think that's such an important. Honestly, it's such an important part of computer like history, right? If you look at folks like, and I know, Carter, you might roll your eyes a bit. I keep bringing up Claude Shannon, but there's a book about Claude Shannon called Mind at Play, and Claude Shannon is the one who figured out Boolean logic correlates with like provably correct algorithms that go into circuit design. But he also was like the father of information theory, and also made like a flame-throwing trombone and a rocket-powered frisbee, and like a bunch of other like really ridiculous things in the middle of it. So
that speaks a lot to me. Yeah. I came from the program I did at the University of Michigan was for music technology, and it was full of off-the-wall projects like that. Like somebody built a table tennis system that had triggers that was playing electronic music while you're playing table tennis. I built a theremin, if you're familiar with the theremin instrument, out of my webcam using video tracking.
Oh yes.
So it was just like constantly, it was constantly like playful projects like that, and that's, you know, definitely something that I gravitate towards. You know, even like as far as programming books go, this is going to be a huge throwback. Back in like 2004-ish, there was these Head First books, and they're really kind of goofy. Yeah, and those were the first books for me that clicked for some reason. They were very visual, very kind of like, you know, trying to be like a teenager from the 90s kind of deal, but those books really clicked for me for some reason back in the day.
Like Head First design patterns.
Head First anything. Head First HTML. I mean, this was like back when
Not to get too deep into like YouTube culture, but have you ever seen Sucker Pinch? He's also known as Tom Seven. He's amazing. PhD in computer science, and they're just all ridiculous. You never know when he's gonna. He posts like once a year or something, and a lot of times on April Fool's Day. But they're delightfully obscure and amazing all at the same time.
That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, it's great, and I learn something every time. Like it's like, oh, he had so much fun making this. It's really cool to see sort of that. I love that, like, joy, the act of making something absurd, and feel like I learn a lot every time.
Do you guys ever watch with your kids Mark Rober on YouTube?
My daughter is. I'm actually a subscriber of his like robot kits. Which, they're expensive. But I'm also like, I have no regrets because we just did the domino machine, and she loves it. It unlocks so much engineering stuff in her, so it's really cool to see.
I love Mark Rober because not only does he make my son want to be an engineer, but he's a graduate of my university, BYU. And so he
Nice.
also makes my son really want to go to BYU. So I'm like, yes.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny. I guess I can keep going on even like more visual books, and these two are like not programming books, but they did. It is funny because my mindset has definitely been helped a lot by these books in general, which is Paul Arden's. It's not how good you are; it's how good you want to be, and whatever you think the opposite. And these are also very graphic. You know, like I mentioned, like I was really into this. Just like art in general for me, you know. So these books are, it's kind of like a page with a story on it, and each one is an individual story just to shift your mindset ever so slightly. You know, they're talking about how everybody did the high jump the exact same way until one guy did it differently, and now everybody does it differently. And that's just a small microcosm of the types of things that they talk about in these books. But if you're out there and you're like, I'm kind of stuck, I found these to be creatively unlocking books in a you know, maybe seem a little cheesy at first, but they're quick reads and they're pretty I don't know, they'll shift you a little bit.
What do you think about the idea of drawing your ideas from a broad source of knowledge? You're sharing some of these books, like you said, they're not specifically programming books necessarily. Yeah. How do you find in your career that, again, kind of not limiting your knowledge to specifically technical stuff, but casting a wider net? How has that affected you?
Yeah, for me, you know, I come from a music background. Music and programming and math and those types of things are all very tightly linked. So, I do use things, and a lot of it comes from even just like unlocking yourself creatively to solve a technical problem. Those types of things in my mind are big for, you know, you ever get stuck on something and you're taking the wrong approach to it, and you need to take a big step back and think about a new approach to this. To me, is not that dissimilar to art in many ways. Like if I'm designing something and I'm like, I've been cranking on something for 2 days and it doesn't feel right, it's not fitting, it's not working, and I take a step back and I rethink the fundamentals of it, is really a lot of times, you know, and especially you're working on something for so long, you're really deep, you've committed to this strategy, and being able to pull back and say, all right, there's something fundamentally wrong with the approach I'm taking right now. Let's get back to the basics. I've learned a whole lot. This was an exploration. So for me, I can definitely see the parallels in between, especially the artistic process, just in general.
Any particular examples from your career that you think about where you had to take a step back and pivot?
Yeah, but a lot of them are business related for me. And I'm trying to think of some code stuff that happens to me kind of every day. I definitely like the way my mind works in a way is more exploratory, where I don't have a problem using essentially like scratch code to try to solve a problem, learn some things, and then recreate it in a more structured manner, rather than having the foresight and the planning to sit down and have a full-on fleshed out goal from the beginning. So yeah, it's definitely like, I think it aids my brain more than it aids some people's brains, but I think it has to do with just how good I am or not good I am at planning specifically. And programming definitely helps a lot with planning. So when you're missing that ability, you know, being able to take a big step back and rethink it is a pretty big thing. I have another book from A Book Apart, which I have A Book Apart book. I'm
Me
a big
too.
fan. Yeah, they're all right back in there.
Oh, design as a job. Oh, that's great.
Yes, this is my favorite of all the Book Apart books, even though, the Mobile First, the hits, the CSS3 ones, those are all great books. But Design as a Job, for freelancers out there, will change how you approach your business as a freelancer or anybody who's accepting money working for somebody else, or as a contractor. Mike Monterio basically goes through, and he's very blunt. It's a very blunt style, and I tend to like that. But it's all about how to talk to clients, these communications, and what to expect, and how to know when clients are walking all over you or running off.
Yep.
Clients are trying to run the show when it's your show. So this is a book, even today, if you're out there and you're doing work that's not necessarily like full-time salary work, or maybe perhaps you're doing some stuff on the side, I found this book to be immensely valuable throughout my entire career, and maybe even like contract negotiation and stuff too. It gives you a lot about how valuable you are as a person with your abilities.
That one was a huge boost. I ran my own cloud computing. I do cloud infrastructure work. So I was doing cloud computing infrastructure work for about 10 years. And those books I actually found, especially in the design community, when you have these very creative sort of amorphous projects that can come up, especially when you're trying to prove value for stuff. That book, it changed me. Like it's huge. I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's such a great book.
Yeah, I would say this book changed me as well in a lot of ways. Another one too, I'm kind of an idea person. I'll chug out a bunch of demos and ideas. That's my job. So my job is teaching, techniques, right? But these techniques are, gained mostly through just firing up quick demos. Quick demos always need ideas. So I'm like pretty much just always hacking on small projects, small ideas. In this book, which is a technique for producing ideas, by James Webb Young. And it's extremely thin. It's a quick little book. And it basically talks about how every single idea is a combination of two other ideas. And it gives you that path to say, you want to create something new, take an idea, take another idea, figure out how to mesh them in an interesting way. But it's obviously much more, ingrained in that. It comes from a place of like an advertising agency. So that's kind of the background of the book, where, we're an advertising agency. We need to come up with some interesting campaigns. How do you produce something that's totally unique? And at the end of the day, nothing is completely unique. So you're just always combining things. So that to me has been like a big thing for me.
I love that. And I'll have to check that one out. I always joke with my wife that we love the idea of having our own business one day. And I say that I have the complete opposite problem of everyone else, which is most people have no money, no skills, and are just full of ideas, right? Yes. And I'm the total opposite. I actually have the money, I have the skills, and I have zero ideas on what a business might look like.
I think we have our next startup idea with large language models, which is we're just going to match randomly two ideas.
Two ideas, yes, exactly. What are two
That's
ideas
how we get Tinder
that
for
have not
cats.
been done? Yeah. Yes.
That's the website. 2 ideas, 2ideas.com. So
it doesn't see this technique does not validate your business of these ideas, but hey,
gives you an idea.
Yeah, I'm the type of person that will write down like 4 ideas for a business in a day, and then look back at them the next day and be like, oh, these are all terrible. But at the time, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go.
2ideas.com is available for $8,500. I think.
Okay. What a steal!
That's a steal. especially with the idea that we have here. So.
Yeah, have you guys seen that dialogue going around about the friend.com?
Friend.com, yeah.
Yes. They sold it for like 1.3 million or something.
Yeah. This guy, it's like another one of those like AI consumer hardware businesses, which are frame judgment until the product comes out. But if it's anything like Rabbit or the Humane Pin, I think we know where this is going. Anyhow, they raised like $2.5 million, spent 1.8 on friend.com. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Did you Fireship recently came out and somebody bought the unofficial Apple Weblogs website because like it's not there anymore. And it's just like AI generated garbage. Which is I read that website so much. Yeah.
I'm watching bookoverflow.io like a hawk. No one's getting this from us.
No, it's good that from you. Yeah, I got a whole bunch more books if you want. I can keep going.
Please do. This is
great. This is amazing. I love it. This is like the best rapid fire book club.
You've planned our podcast for the next 6 months.
Yeah. Well, you know what? A lot of these aren't tech books. So another non-tech book, which is one that's immensely popular or was popular, it was kind of had its moment, was the Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Which, I'm not a messy person in general, but the thing that I got most out of this book, and as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, oh my God, I could apply so much of this to my code in general, is about storing things next to like things, having an order for things, having that order be uniform in a way that you can apply that order in that system across your entire, whether it's your dresser or it's my state machine or something. I want this to always function and be ordered the same way. That way, going into a situation, I know where everything goes. I know what to do. You're following these patterns and conventions. So for me, as I was listening to that book, it was more than just like, I got to clean up my stuff, but it was like, wow, I could apply a lot of these methods and ideas in places, and I should be, where sometimes, you get lost in the flow of things, and you're just working, your head's down working, and maybe you're not taking the time to evaluate those systems from a productivity standpoint, not just not just a technical standpoint.
My LinkedIn says that I'm the Marie Kondo of platform engineering,
Yes.
because I like to remove things that don't bring you joy. And
Totally.
also, I absolutely roll up my t-shirts. So she's
yeah.
permanently influenced me there.
Do you store them in your
I still do
dresser
a ton
rolled
of
up?
this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I do have one I pack for a trip.
So I'm living out of a suitcase right now because I'm in Barcelona.
Cool.
But yes, so they're rolled up there. But yes, sometimes it depends on who's folding the laundry, but my wife will fold it and then I'll like roll it up and then put it in my dresser. It's it really is a more efficient way of storing your clothes. It's as crazy as it sounds.
There's a lot of things like that. Even like when I'm putting anything away, whether it's clothes or whatever, I'm thinking, where is this thing's place, and does that make sense?
Yes.
Do I have multiple places for the same thing? Like all of those types of things, and it is so easily applicable to programming as well. That I definitely love that book.
I love that. That's cool.
Yeah, another one that I really like is Eat That Frog, which is a book I've talked about a bunch on
classic.
syntax. It's also like a self-help book.
I did the audiobook
Eat
of
That Frog
one.
is great.
Yeah.
And so the premise is basically you have things you have to do. It can feel overwhelming. You put the biggest, baddest thing to do that you got to do today, and you do it first. And then you have a priority system. My priority system is just taking my to-do list and putting the top thing at the top, and then ordering them down. I find with productivity systems in general, the moment that systems becomes like too crazy, it just like, oh, I have a P4 and it's a 1 and it affects the, it's a 1 lift and it's a P4. Like, man, I'm not going to use it. So I've gone into more of a simplistic manner with my productivity systems. And so for me, Eat That Frog was a good one a lot, just in general for getting things done. I think there's also a book called Getting Things Done that I really liked as well.
Oh, that's a great book. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great book by David Allen. So GTD, that was a good book as well.
That's also that's OG Audible right there.
Yes.
If you're
an Audible book. Yeah, I know. You have finished. I know. I have my Audible is like crazy because I've been subscribing for so long, and I just have so many.
I started in 2007, and I think the 4-Hour Workweek might have been my first.
Oh
Audible
yeah. Yeah, I definitely listened to 4-Hour Workweek, but it might have been before Audible for me. That as cheesy as that book can be, or whatever, that book even unlocked me a little bit too. I was working for a job I didn't see myself doing forever and things like that. So I definitely got myself thinking, and which is one of the reasons why I started my YouTube channel way back in 2012. So definitely unlocked me a little bit.
That's
there.
so cool.
I like what you keep saying. You keep talking about like unlocking and just kind of broadening the horizons. It's something we've really enjoyed as we've been reading books and engaging with long form ideas. Is like I love Twitter. I'm like a shameless Twitter junkie, and I do love the quick exposure to lots of different viewpoints. Right, I think that's great. But at the same time, it's easy to find yourself in an echo chamber or to kind of just be perpetually reinforcing your beliefs. It's really nice when you sit down with a book and engage with an idea over a week or two. That again, I just keep hearing this phrasing from you that it unlocks you. It kind of lets you know about additional possibilities. We felt that way reading some of our books, like Clean Coder by Uncle Bob, Working Effectively with Legacy Code by Michael Feathers, where even if we don't agree with every single thing in the book, like Working Effectively with Legacy Code, we described as oddly inspirational, because it just, for someone to come and say, hey, this giant mammoth monster code base, there's actually a way out of it. And there's these techniques you can apply, and it's not hopeless. And it's just, yeah, there's something really valuable about getting these extended points of view from other people and realizing that, yeah, there's just a bigger world out there than what you can encounter in your strictly in your day-to-day or on Twitter.
Yeah, that really fits in tightly with, like, a lot of times online discussions about these things are so not only hyperbolic, but like just so intentionally made to be black and white. It's like it's every other day you see a conversation about, functional programming versus OOP, and like people just complaining about it still, or fighting with each other, or in more my world, it's like React.js versus Svelte versus Vue versus Solid, all these different systems. And man, people are so afraid, I think, of picking up ideas from outside of that bubble. I'm a React developer. I write React. But they're so similar in so many different ways that if you took, I don't know, 2 hours and tried out some Solid code, or tried out some Svelte code, or tried out some Vue code, it might make you a better React developer just simply from the exposure to different approaches to things. And I've always found that kind of a little bit to be odd, is that like people are really adverse to getting exposure to ideas that aren't what they're in tune with.
I also feel like, and I hope I'm not projecting here, there's a through line of overcoming self-limiting beliefs, right? Because I felt like, obviously we all have our own limitations, but there's also that little voice that you have to give yourself permission to sort of take those risks sometimes. And I feel like some of these books feel like catalyst type books.
Yeah,
has that been your experience?
Yeah, totally. I've never been the type of person who has been held back by that sort of way. I've, I think I'm, unfortunately, sometimes like without the ability to completely check myself in those types of ways. Like maybe I should take a step back. But one thing that these types of books have helped me do is just reframe myself, because I have some learning disabilities. So for me, it helps me restructure my thought process in a way that, helps me approach these things in a more interesting way. Another book, Atomic Habits, great book. I'm a big habit builder. That's something that I've done my entire life, whether that is, if I set a goal to do something, I'll do it, as much as possible. For instance, our podcast, we show up every week. It used to be Mondays we record 1 episode. Then Mondays we record 2 episodes. Then Mondays we record 3 episodes. For years now, it's been, we record 3 episodes every single Tuesday, and I don't miss it. I show up, I do it. That's like part of my life. I've built that habit, and because of that, we've been able to hit the 800 episodes or whatever we've been able to hit. But not only that, like I did that with my YouTube channel. I started a YouTube channel. I was doing 9 videos a week. I did 9 videos a week for like 4 years. And because of that, it's just giving me that like regimen of building these habits. You approve those habits, and you continue to do it overall. And even now, like one of the most recent things I did is I wanted to learn like local first development. Is a big thing I'm into right now. So I built a habit tracker for myself, and hell, I use the habit tracker every day. I've like built so many habits from this thing, and I got to learn local first software out of it. So it's a 2 for 1 there.
I love hearing all of this, and like you said, you're not the kind of person who just limited yourself. If you want something, you kind of go out and get it. It's something I tell people in this industry. I do a lot of like job search coaching, because for some reason I've had to like do job searches way too many times in my life, and so while I wish in a lot of ways I were a better developer, I actually have a lot of great advice about how to get hired. And but I always just tell people, like, they'll be like, well, I want to apply to this place, but I don't know if they'll say yes. I'm just like, well, what's the worst that happens? You apply and they tell you no. Well, then congratulations, you don't work there. Like you already don't work there. And I just tell people, I'm like, so many people are going to say no to you in your life. Don't be one of them. Like, you can say yes to yourself all the time. Yeah,
right.
That's a great. That's a great. I've never heard that said that way. That don't say no to yourself in that regard. And I agree. Even like applying for jobs has always been a thing too, where people say, "Well, I don't even know if I want to leave my current job." apply anyways. Apply for the job. If they give you the job, then you have the job offer and your current job, and then you can make the decision. But if you don't have this job, there's no decision to make. The decision is you apply for the job, and maybe you get it. And if you get it, you cross that bridge when you come to it. And as far as saying like not saying no to yourself goes, it's just like it's a skill you have to practice. And people think that, okay, I'll say yes to myself right now, or if somebody else is saying no to me, people are telling you can't do this, you can't do that. Being able to push back on that and just do it is not something that just happens automatically. You do it once or twice. You get used to this process of being rejected. You get used to this process of potentially not having things go the way you want, and you get used to it. It happens, and then you kind of get immune to failure in that way, because you start to not doubt that yourself in that way. You start not to say no to yourself because I'm going to fail. You're like, what's failure? I failed 100 times.
That you saying people like, well, I don't know if I want to leave my job. But you say, well, at least you'll have the new offer in hand. I mean, that is the genesis of my entire career. I signed up for, if it's funny, we try not to mention the companies we've worked for in the discussion episodes, but I found when we have guests on, I have to say some of the names so that we actually know what we're talking about. Disney was my first job out of college. And I love Disney. Like my family's just huge Disney theme park fanatics, like to the point that like my mom and dad have in their house 6 different clocks set to the 6 different times of the 6 different Disney theme parks. Like,
wow.
Yeah,
that's dedication.
It's hardcore dedication. Like it's in our blood. Anyhow, so I really, really wanted to work at Disney. I applied to like 30 different internships there. I got an offer to interview for one of them, but then when they start to do it, or when we're setting up the time, they say, just so you know, this is a January through April internship, right? And I was like, oh, well, I need a summer one. I can't leave school. My wife, we both can't leave school. And so I talked to my wife about it. We were married at the time. And I said, I was like, well, I'll just interview because it'll be like good practice, right?
Yes.
And then if I get the offer, I'll say no, right? And we'll just kind of look for summer internships again. She's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then to my surprise, they actually gave me the offer for the internship. And I remember telling my wife, she's like, oh, that's so neat. I'm like, I think we should talk about it. Like, I think we should take it. And after talking about it and working through it, like, yeah, we did. And we dropped school and rearranged classes to move out to Florida for a couple months to do it. But every job I've had since then has been downstream of that one. And it's one of those things where, just trying to put yourself out there a little more and say, well, yeah, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't hurt to have an opportunity, because you're right. Once you get that opportunity in the hand, it's surprising how much it reshapes your priorities, because we were totally like, we're not going to do it until we have the offer. And then we're like, wait a minute, this might make sense.
Yeah, I think that's a problem with people making decisions, is that they're trying to make a decision between one solid thing and one theoretical thing. And like, that's kind of impossible to do, right? You're like, well, this could be like, well, you know, don't make the decision until you have concrete information in front of you.
So Scott, what was your first job after college?
Oh man. Okay. So interesting story. I graduated from college. I was still trying to make it in music. I wanted to be a professional musician full time. Actually, a lot of people I went to school with ended up becoming professional musicians. The Wolfpack band. Have you ever heard of Wolfpack?
Wolfpack, yeah. What song? I listen to one of their songs. Animal Spirits, I think, is the one.
Animal Spirits, yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah. So a lot of my program was producing talented musicians, and I was like, yeah, that's me, I'm right there. And I certainly wasn't. I had no ability to make it in that industry. So I had a job offer in New York for video editing for a guitar magazine. My uncle was the editor-in-chief. It was a nepotism job, and it was a sick-ass job. It was really cool. It was like rock stars come in, you get to film them all day. It paid well. It was great. It was in New York. I met my wife in between getting that job offer and, graduating from school. And I made the choice to stay in Michigan, was where we were living. I made the choice to stay in Michigan and pursue that relationship. And I had to turn down that really awesome job. So my first job was as an accountant at a record label, Ghostly International.
Wow.
And I took it because I needed a job, and they needed an accountant. And I said, sure, whatever. Okay. So I did that for a year, and then I worked as a projectionist at the University of Michigan for a year and a half. And it's so funny because, all this time I'm doing freelance work. I'm programming, I'm building websites, I'm designing, but I still had this like really twisted idea that I was going to make it in music. So like my personal website at the time was like, Scott Tolinski, he does music and motion graphics and web development and graphic design. And my wife was like looking at it, she's like, you gotta like choose one of these things. Like, why are you trying to do four of these things? So, as a digital projectionist, as a projectionist with digital projectors, I should say, the job entails turning the projector on at the beginning of the day and turning the projector off. And then if something happens to the projector in the middle of the day, you fix it, which it never does. So I had a full like 8 hours a day to work on freelance work,
That's so
build
cool.
out my skills in a way. And I hustled on it. I, learned PHP. I got better at all the stuff I was doing. I was doing freelance projects. And so by the time I was just really getting sick of doing that, I applied for some things, and like we'd even talked about, there was a job that came up with a local agency, a small 12-person agency, and it was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I used to walk by it on my way to work every day. And I would say, gosh, that looks like a cool place to work. It was very designerly. I mean, they had only 2 developers there. It was very much a design, a print design agency that was moving into web. So it was so designery and so cool. And they were looking for a job. My wife she's been very instrumental clearly in my career, but she found the job posting. And I was like, I don't think I'm good enough for this job. I applied. I wrote a really, really nice, heartfelt cover letter, which I know people like feel like cover letters are a waste of time, but I do think the cover letter got me the job because I talked about how I walked by that place every day, and I really wanted to explore that opportunity. And they gave me the job. The guy, my boss there, took a chance on me. It was a dev agency, and it was cranking out Drupal and WordPress sites, as many as I could.
I love hearing this and hearing about your path. I think something I say every now and again is just this idea that the future belongs to the people who show up, right? And just hearing kind of your path. I think some people, this is actually, if you listen to, I love Conan O'Brien, and I listen to his podcast all the time. I watch him on TV all the time. And something he says is just kind of like, people have this idea that like, if you're watching something on TV, it's just kind of fated to be, and like, of course things are going well, but behind the scenes, it's off in a big mess, and it's very unsure if you're going to stay on TV. And you often had to hustle to get on TV. And I kind of feel the same way about people like yourself who have like a successful podcast and a YouTube channel. And you think, well, I'm not like Scott Tolinski. Scott Tolinski was fated. It was written in the stars for him to do this. No, it wasn't. Right. Just hearing your path to get here, I don't know. It's really cool. And it's something I love. I'm somewhat of a history buff, and especially like American history, and especially presidential history. And something that's really cool if you study the history of our presidents is realizing how many of them were just like regular people. Like, we've certainly had some of our presidents who are like the equivalent of like nepotism hires, but a lot of our presidents, like Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon, who kind of spanned the political spectrum, a lot of them came from like nothing when they were growing up. And I don't know, like it's really cool. Obviously that's kind of on one end of the spectrum, but then you come down to us lowly podcasters, right? And just realize that, like a lot of it is just not being the person who says no to yourself, and just trying something, putting yourself out there. And it's cool. It's really inspirational to hear your story and realize this isn't some guy who came out of the womb typing code.
Yeah. I know. And even like, I mean, you say that in terms of even like doing podcasts or creating content or anything, but like being a better developer for me is all about showing up every day with a curiosity. And it's a curiosity that like leads me to try new things constantly and explore. So like, if I see something, I want to figure out how it works. But more importantly, I have a lot of ideas and I can crank on them, and I'm just going to show up and let that curiosity pull me into the technical. I'm not making the technical drive me into what I'm building. I'm letting my curiosity pull me into the things that I have to learn to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Actually, it's funny. It's not in here. This is the book that may have gotten me that first dev job. CSS3 for web designers by A Book Apart. when in my interview, my interviewer, my boss and mentor at the time, he had asked me, what kind of blogs, what kind of books you read? And I said, a book apart, a list apart. That's what I'm about. I love all this stuff. And he was like, me too. Let's talk about it. And I think that led to a really good conversation. Another book that I really like, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work by DHH. Which, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work for me was a book that came to me at the right time because I was working too much. I was trying to do too many things. I was running my business and really overloaded myself. So it really helped me take a step back in terms of understanding how to work smarter, work with better people, work with people better, I should say. It is funny because this is like legit. My son, who's 7, he said something, I forget the other day, or not the other day, like a couple months ago, and it was like, you don't like to work hard. And I was like, well, why do you think I don't like to work hard? I'm like always working. I work, very hard. He's like, you told me you like to do as little as possible. And I was like, yeah, what I mean by that is you adjust your systems to do less so that you can do more, right? You're getting burnt out less. You're taking different approaches and things like that. So that's always been a big one for me. It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. Definitely a highly recommended book.
I could have used this. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's a running joke on this podcast as I keep mentioning this awful little startup I worked at. I worked there for 3 months. And I will not reveal their name. If someone gets to $1 million,
that's a lot of return on investment for this podcast for 3 months of your
exactly.
life.
Yeah, like it was so bad. It's not on my LinkedIn. It's not on my resume. Like I worked there for 3 months. I was like, screw this, I'm out of here. But it keeps coming up on this podcast, like in almost every episode. And this is a I will reveal the name if we get to 1 million subscribers, everyone. So, but because I felt that at that startup so much, like this idea that like, there's a type of person that really derives importance from the craziness. Yes, and I remember that like our release processes were nightmares there. And like, I just remember they would like put up posters of like the dog, like the "This is fine" meme with like the fire. And I love that meme. Like it's funny. Yeah. And they would like hand out like dumpster fire toys. And like, it made me so angry because I was trying everything I could to fix it and like to get it better. And I just kept running into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And then to run into that roadblock, like I would have had more respect for them if they had said like, oh yeah, this is the best it's ever going to be. But instead they were like acknowledging and kind of like reveling in the craziness and then also not trying to fix it. And so, yeah, I just think some people get into their minds like, if I'm constantly frustrated, I wouldn't be mad if it weren't important. Therefore, if I'm mad, it is important. And yeah, I just ran into that a lot there. And so I'll have to check this book out. What would you say was Things Don't Have to Be Crazy at Work?
It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy.
It doesn't have to be crazy at work.
Yeah. I will say DHH and Jason Fried are some of my favorite contrarians in the tech industry. I don't always agree with them, but I respect them. I actually years ago, and this is aging myself because I'm 40, but I was running my consulting business and subscribing to Signal versus Noise, which is 37 Signals blog. And they had this workshop called The Switch that they did up in Chicago. And it was like $1,000 for a day. And at the time, it was like not a trivial amount of money, but I signed up and I went. And I got to like hang out with Jason Fried. And it was the most amazing experience. Like I don't regret spending the money and seeing what 37 Signals like functioned like in Chicago. And I've had like a lifelong respect for the conclusions they reach, the hot takes they make. If they're like, oh, we don't use frameworks and we like put JSON straight in the browser, I'm like, cool, let me hear your perspective. Like maybe I don't want to live my life that way, but I respect that you have this opinion. Like it's cool. So
here's our promise. Nathan and I, we will not charge $1,000 to meet us. In fact, listeners, if you're listening,
I'm not going to promise that because you never know.
Okay, so Nathan might. Okay, so here's what I'll tell you, listeners. You can often find me at the Taco Bell on Redwood Road in Saratoga Springs. If you find me there and if you pay me $5, actually you got to pay for the meal, I will eat it with you. So that's what a steal compared to $1,000.
Yeah,
right.
$1,000 to eat at Taco Bell with me. So
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. I bop around Denver, so you see me say hi. We're actually going to be. We haven't announced this or anything. We're doing like a meetup at GitHub Universe in San
Oh, cool.
Francisco, like the last week of October. So if you
that's
are
so
in San
cool.
Francisco, I guess just follow our Twitter account. We'll announce when the meetup is. So we'll do
That's
a
awesome.
nice little meetup. You can hang out with Wes and I, and usually we just chat and have beers and stuff. It's nice and fun.
I'm down in the less cool Colorado Springs, so I'm not too far from Denver.
No way. Cool. Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah,
it's beautiful, but it's not as cool as Denver. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll go to Manitou to do the incline.
There we go. I've not done the incline yet, so maybe we should do the incline together. That'd be awesome.
Oh, I'm down. Yeah, it is. It's not a lot of fun, but I used to go with a guy who was like the type of guy who would be really inspiring. He'd like basically jog up the incline and then do pull-ups on a tree at the top, and you're just like,
why
how
not?
is this possible?
Yeah,
it's like it's an old like cog railway that went up a mountain, so it's a pretty incredible hike.
He's like watches a Goggins YouTube video, and he's like, I'm doing this.
Yeah,
just pull it up.
I guess I don't know how much time we have here, but another book that I really like, and this book it's so funny. A lot of the books that I ended up really liking could be cliched in any type of way, or even like, there are books that are like really kind of getting into management. I've never been in management really. I do have, people I'm managing now, but a book that really helped me in life in general is Crucial Conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is definitely like kind of like a business schooly type of book in a way that it's like, here's how you talk to your employees. But the thing that I found most interesting about this book is just like talking about the importance of like direct communication with empathy. There's a graph of like these people are bad at they're indirect and they're passive aggressive, or these people are indirect and aggressive, or these people are aggressive and direct, and these people are they're direct and empathetic or something. I forget what the chart is. Don't quote me on that one. But like, it was basically saying it's better to be direct no matter what, because everybody can be on the same page. And it goes through examples. It talks about all these different CEOs and situations that we're in and how they approach any sort of conflict or situations or anything like that. And it goes as far as like, talking if there's like if I have an issue with anybody, as a problem or not a problem, it's like completely changed the way that I talk to people. Just being able to directly communicate what I'm thinking or feeling in a way that's not aggressive or not, a bit more understanding there. But I think the directness for me was always a thing where like maybe you hold on to some things, you're not taking care of them. Maybe it's with coworkers and you're not addressing, or maybe when you do address your coworkers with some code issues, it comes off as being aggressive, right? We agreed to use CSS variables for every color. Why did you put this hex value here? No, it's like, what are the ways that we can either prevent that conversation from happening by using like a style lint or something to have the machine give them that feedback, or to give them that feedback in a way that's like, hey, we're doing this for these particular reasons. Hey, it'd be cool if you did it. It's just rather than sitting there and being like, I wish so-and-so wouldn't be using these variables here in this way. So communication is something I think that's like greatly overlooked in our industry. And I think there's, even as far as like code reviews go, it changes how I do my code reviews and the language I use in my code reviews. Crucial Conversations, I think some people would see it as being cheesy. But if you put it on, I think you'll find that it will change how you approach talking to people differently.
I love what you say about things being like cheesy or cliche, because I think you see it with a lot of software engineers. Like, we always want to have the hot take. We always want to cut a bit against the grain, right? But bringing up Walt Disney again, actually, I read a biography, Walt Disney, an American Original, and I love kind of the old Disney movies, the ones he worked on, like Pinocchio and Beauty and the Beast, or not Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White, right? And you watch them now, and I remember when I watch them, I'm like, oh, these are really beautiful. They're a little cheesy, right? But they must have been very sophisticated for his time, I imagine. And reading that book, I didn't realize that, no, they weren't considered that. They were, the word they used was corny, right? And his daughter once, I guess he once showed like a movie to his daughter, and his daughter was like, that's so corny. And his response was like, well, he's like, people like corn. They eat a lot of it. Like, there must be something good about being corny. And he said, he's like, I'm just kind of a corny guy. I don't know how to be anything else. And I think there's, like sometimes things are cliched because they're true, right? Like sometimes, and I think there is, obviously you don't want to just kind of cargo cult and bandwagon any sort of popular sentiment, but at the same time, you don't want to like psyop yourself into automatically believing the opposite of any popular sentiment because you always want to be the hot take guy.
That's my knee-jerk reaction. I'll be honest. I say that I'm a recovering contrarian.
I'm definitely, I have a bit of that in me as well. But, I think there are just some areas that I think developers, they don't put effort into. They'll put effort into grokking algorithms, but they're not going to put effort into, conversational skills. And I've seen that a number of times where, like, I've worked with people they wouldn't let in client meetings. And it's like, I never want to be the developer they don't let in client meetings. I want to be the guy that they want in the client meetings because I can express the work that I'm doing and the value it gives or whatever. So I do just think, like, a lot of those books that I see myself picking are very much, like, I think underrepresented skills from developers.
Absolutely. Well, any other books that you want to share?
I mean, I can keep going. My Audible is like straight up big old list here. One Small Step Can Change Your Life by Dr. Robert Maurer. This book is it's about Kaizen. It's about Kaizen, which is like the idea that you can make a small step to anything as an introductory to greater change. It goes right along with Atomic Habits, right? So you're building a habit of something that you want to do, but it doesn't have to be, I'm going to start this habit, full force right now. It can be, I just need something to build up that muscle so that I can progressively even get better. So he goes through a lot of examples about how small, progressive incremental changes over a long period of time can have a massive impact rather than thinking that you need to have a massive impact out of the gate. And so I've been taking that approach to a lot of things in general. That might be all I have on hand. I have a lot of books. The Dream Machine by Michael Waldrop is from the awesome Stripe Press. Stripe Press, I would recommend every single book that Stripe Press does. If you're Stripe just as a company, pretty neat. But Stripe Press specifically, their books are just fantastic.
We're talking about Stripe, Machine, like the payment processor Stripe?
Yes.
They have
you ever
a book?
Seen the Stripe?
No, I haven't seen this.
You're in for a treat for a website in addition to a handful of books.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
the website's really great in general. It's a really cool, inspirational website. But all of the books, every single one of them has been really great. From The Art of Doing Science and Engineering, Learning to Learn was a good one that I liked. The High Growth Handbook was really good. But the Dream Machine is, if you're a fan of history, which I am, is all about the things that led to computing overall, going very far back, going back to how psychology influenced the ideas that would eventually become computing in the ways that we know it today.
So cool.
It's really, really in-depth history book, and I found it to be just really great.
I love that you brought up Stripe because I think it was most recently Lenny's podcast had the CTO from Stripe on, and I was very impressed because he doesn't normally have like C-suite folks that are at least out of product. But they're such like a product oriented company that even their tech leadership is like very product oriented, which is interesting. I always just find the product world interesting. My first interaction with Stripe, when I realized this company was built different, was in 2014. They had a CTF, they had like a capture the flag, and it was a recruiting tool for them to hire engineering talent. I didn't make the final cut, but I got far enough along that I got like a t-shirt. It was like a Stripe branded CTF, like 8-bit looking shirt.
Cool.
And I was so proud of myself because I was like pretty early into getting serious about programming. I did all of the stuff in Go, which is like my favorite programming language. And it was like a badge of honor because I came out of it with such a positive view of the engineering team at Stripe. And I don't know if that was purposefully their plan, but it had a lasting impression with me. And like, I would just pay it attention. After that, I paid attention for years.
I did final rounds with Stripe before I went with my current company for a variety of reasons. But I walked away from those interviews with a very impressive culture. It's funny, just as you guys talking about Stripe, that last job search was anxiety inducing for a lot of reasons. And so I'm just in this room. I remember pacing back and forth, sincerely talking up Stripe to the recruiter, because I do think their mission and what they do is really, really cool. But at the same time, it's just bringing back all these memories of being like, I need a new job. Come on. So
yeah,
lots of great memories in this office right here.
Yeah, I know, man. The whole job search, everything is tough. You know, like just like you, I had a really bad startup experience. I'd worked there for like 6 months. It was clear they were going nowhere, but because of management specifically. And then, you know, the day my son was born, that week, sorry, my son was born, I forget, like on a Tuesday, but that week, my parents are over. I'm driving my parents back to the airport. It's a Sunday at like 8:00. And the founder of the company's calling me about a broken feature in the pre-alpha software. I'm like, I just had my first child. It's a weekend. It's in the evening. It's like, how many more red flags can you get? And I quit on the Monday, and the co-founder was like, I get it, but then I didn't have a job, which is why we started the podcast. So it was for me, it was a transformational quitting of a job. You know,
it's so fascinating as you talk to more people, and I've experienced in my life myself that these turns of bad fortune often become the springboards for some really cool, really successful endeavors. Like you say, starting the podcast, I've had that happen in my career where for one reason or another, something didn't go the way I wanted. And so that kind of forces me down a different path. But then you look back on it and you're like, thank goodness. Like that happening to me was the best thing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sincerely, at the moment, impossible to get that reaction, but you figure it out. That's for sure.
I journal every day, and I had a particularly rough patch of my career, and I journaled every day through it. And I try to go back and read my journal, just to reflect on things. There's about 3 weeks of entries there where like I'll read them one day, but I'm not, even now, even though several years in the past, I'm still like, I'm not quite ready to revisit that part. Yeah. Super happy with how everything worked out. But yeah, like you said, in the moment, it's tough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it can build that resiliency.
Well, Scott, I mean, thank you so much for joining us. You crushed this format. When we do this with another guest, like, I don't know, it's going to be hard to top this.
You set the standard up here. So
Well, glad to hear that. Yeah, I was a little worried that I didn't bring enough technical books.
No. Every time we interview an author, that's our final question we ask them is, what are you reading? And it can be anything. And we actually even get, like, Brian Kernahan recommended, and it's the one we're reading right now for our episode, which will release not this Monday, but next Monday. I guess by the time you're listening to this, the episode's probably already released. Anyhow, all that to say, Recoding America by Jennifer Polka, which is somewhat technical, but not targeted for software engineers. But we're reading it and really enjoying it. And our plan in the future is to branch out into a lot of the kind of books you've mentioned too, more productivity and business.
And I'll say that it's cool to see how empathetic folks are that are high functioning. Like Brian Kernahan really cares, and that's why he's done so many awesome things in his career. And that's obvious with you too, right? Like, it's like, I know that craftsmanship is something that's like, some people use it as this like kind of exclusionary thing, but if you care about your craft, if you just care about growing as a person and you realize where your weaknesses are and that you can strengthen them, I love the places you've reached for this. And I'm really glad that you shared this. It's going to influence our backlog of reading lists. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I try not to I don't listen to the episodes really after we publish. I'm just enough to kind of edit them. This is what I'm going to listen to like on my run or something. Cause I got to write all this stuff down. Yeah, this is great.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm a big self-help book guy where I can, for every one I can recommend, I probably have, 20 that I didn't like. So I'll listen to a lot of this stuff and like we mentioned, see what sticks and see what resonates and, see what doesn't. Yeah.
It's one day for the podcast. We're going to read a book we don't like. We've read some books where we kind of give disclaimers and say, listen, you got to be in a very specific situation for this book to be really helpful to you, but we've never read a book where we've just been straight up like, don't read this one. So I am curious about what happens when we finally read one like that, because we have a promise between the two of us to be honest about the books we read. Nice, but honest.
When are we going to have the Marquise Brownlee Rabbit R1?
Exactly.
Oh,
right.
yes,
Right.
yeah.
Oh gosh.
Oh yeah. I could have given that review before that product came out. I'll just tell you that.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Scott. Is there anything you want to share with our listeners or plug before we sign off here?
Just check out Syntax. We're on YouTube. We're on podcast players. Syntax FM, syntax.fm if you're just looking for the website. We release 3 episodes, and the whole concept is that a lot of the stuff can be dry. So we want it to feel like, 2 people who do this stuff for fun are hanging out and chatting about the stuff that they get to do for fun all day. So, it really feels like I get to hang out with a good buddy. The only thing missing is like having a beer or something, but we're just hanging out and chatting about things that we're learning or things that we're doing, and we do so from like an educational perspective. So if you're into that, yeah, check it out.
Yeah, that's great. I listen to Syntax and I get that vibe from it. It's been helpful as we shape the vibe of our podcast. That's how I always described it to people before we launched. I said, I want it to be like 2 coworkers discussing a book over lunch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
friendly
so much better that way.
And educational.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Syntax is a great podcast. Please check it out. It is our North Star as we do this podcast, because I know you guys have been very successful on YouTube, and I'm like, that's what we're aiming for. We're going to hopefully be up there with Syntax one day. So Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your books, not only for sharing the specific books, but I think for providing a great example to our readers of all of the things you can learn by reading books, and just the accumulation of knowledge over the years. That's what we try to tell our readers is we don't get too many comments like this. We've gotten 1 or 2 snippy comments where it's a little like, you shouldn't be reading code, you should be writing code. It's like, yes, obviously, right? We're not saying quit your day job and become a book monk or something like that. We're saying substitute 20 minutes of Twitter a day with 20 minutes of reading. And, I imagine that's similar to what you've done, where you probably have not devoted, you didn't take a sabbatical to read all these books. You just read them or listened to them all over the years. And here you are able to share a wealth of knowledge with our listeners, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, a little bit at a time goes a long way. That Kaizen book is pretty much directly about that topic. I do want to say, guys, I think your podcast is awesome. I first listened to the Fundamentals of Software Architecture episode you released. I think it was your 5th episode. That was like the first one I listened to. I don't even know how it became in my the timeline, but I put it on, and the first thing I thought was like, this is like a tech podcast I could regularly listen to, and I really had a great time. Which, let me tell you, I don't listen to like any tech podcast, so I got to say, it was really engaging, and I really love what you're doing. It helps me understand the books, especially, like I said, I'm not a great reader. If the book isn't available on audiobook, I get a lot of value out of what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That means so much, and we are well aware of how cheap and disposable a medium podcasting is. Like, there's no barrier to entry. Anyone with a computer can get into it. So when we wanted to launch a podcast, we really wanted to create something that was meaningful and substantive for software engineers. And so hearing that from you, who has lots of experience doing just that, it really means a lot to us, and validates that while there's still a lot of improvements we can make, we're on the right path. So we really appreciate hearing that, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Well, that's great. Thanks everyone for listening. You can find us on Twitter at Book Overflow Pod. You can find me on Twitter at Carter Morgan. Nathan also has Functionally Imperative on YouTube and Substack, where he interviews other interesting creative folks. You can contact us at contact@bookoverflow.io. And if you want to stay up to date with our reading schedule, just go to bookoverflow.io. Scroll to the bottom of the page, and you'll find our reading schedule. And we'd love for you to read along with us, because one day, hopefully, you'll be able to, maybe you too could come on the podcast and talk about all the books you've read. But I guess that wouldn't work, because it would just be all the books we read. So anyhow, read the books. As you can see from Scott, you can learn a lot from. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You have a great rest of your day.